really helped me with the most. And it was all about timing. As he sitting in front of it, he just listened to my spiel about how difficult a time I was having 40 some years ago, and just said, and he knew I was a meditator. He knew we'd already talked about meditation, but then his main thing is you can do it. And anytime I would come up with any kind of objection, you can do it. And it's like I was feeling I can. He could see. You could say he could see where I really needed to be pushed, and that's it was feeling insecure and like I couldn't do it. And so, since he was I've studied in two lineages, the Tibetan Kagyu lineage, well, three actually, if you include Shambhala, that, and also Sokuzan. So it's all awareness practice, just different forms. So if we're observing look at the forms that you're following, very simple, just the simplest one that everyone does, you get up and brush your teeth. It's a form, something you do. You don't even have to particularly, usually, maybe in a few cases, don't have to think about it. It's just the next thing on the list. And that's a good way to make meditation something that's so that the actual sitting down, holding still, looking at the wall, looking at the floor, whatever is in front of you, and don't add. It's like the mind is like a food processor. It's just constantly chopping. From the time you're born, you're taught this, and you're taught that, and you're taught you have to accomplish, you're taught you have to mind, you have to do this, you have to do that. Some of it, depending on how our innate wiring, our karma, however you want to call it, we either really want to comply and we want to please everyone and we want to make sure we do the right thing when we're 7 years old, or else we're just trying to look for a way to rebel, punch somebody. We got probably one of our little playmates. So observing the form seems to be the important part. Observing what the form is. Like when you come in here, there are people in here who have done the sutras we did hundreds of times. We do this happens. These sutras are chanted 7 days a week, and then the Heart Sutra is chanted in English every night, just about every night. A few nights off there for different kinds of book study and so on. But it's people that have done it hundreds and hundreds of times. Their experience of doing that is much different than you. That you come in here and you think this is weird. They're all talking in a foreign language, and they're bowing to this guy. And some are bowing all the way down. Some are, the kind of lazy people. But and it's not. There's nothing being worshipped here. To be made clear to you, but the projection, when we see it, we think worship because we're taught that. Right? And you know why we do that is because we cannot handle having an open mind. An open mind means what? I don't know. There's a double meaning. I don't know, and I don't know. I don't know what it is. That's the nature of openness. Like you come into a situation and you the way we put it into concepts or language, we say we give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to jump into any kind of judgment or even interpretation, because as soon as you start to judge and interpret whatever it is that you're looking at, you stop looking at it. That's why I say all evidence is partial. If you remember that, then you'll be able to look at the evidence, and you'll also look right through it. You realize, well, here's some of it. This is usually what happens in our legal systems. We don't look at the entire situation that a 15-year-old kid has been in since he was born or she was born, and they get in trouble, and we don't look at the whole thing. We just say, broke the rule because what? We're lazy. We don't want to take the time or the effort. We don't want to put the energy and so on into fundamentally helping another human being. We just want them to mind, and this is where we get dictatorships and so on. Questions at this point? Sheldon?
The word form is talked about a couple of different things that form is used to talk about. It's used in 5 skandhas and 12 links in
Yes.
that talk about what makes up a
Yes.
self. And then you talk about it in the forms that we use
Yes.
here. Can you talk about how those two different things are related? The word means the same thing in both situations, right?
Well, there's in the sense of the body. There's the body, the form, which you can feel. It's solid. It's here. It's seems to be ongoing in some sense, form. And then there's everything else, which are the consciousnesses, the the six sense fields, or the ayatanas, fancy words for them. And in Buddhism, we go down and snoop down around and find out what every single one is and what all the parts of it are, with the idea of searching it out. But you don't need to do some kind of excavation of the thought process in order to have an understanding of what it's about. You can do some. Some people get very carried away with that. Not wrong, it's just their style. So, but what we do is we use some of it, like the ones that you mentioned, the five skandhas. The five skandhas, the word skandha is a Sanskrit word that means heap or pile. And this is an ancient teaching that goes way back. And before the Buddha, form, then the other five: feeling, perception, concept or memory, and consciousness are the six sense fields. They're objects and they're organ of sense. So we're just breaking it down so we can see what it is, and then we go back to looking at how that operates. So it's a matter of seeing that in the teaching, form is empty, what we think about it. So when we say something is empty, the teaching in Buddhism is emptiness, form and emptiness, that everything is empty. We're saying that anything you look at is empty. It's there, but it's empty of what you think about it. It's empty of your projection onto it. Quite often, the way I describe it is, as soon as you start to label something or project onto it, you stop investigating. All investigation ceases. You know how it feels to investigate something? I don't know. I don't know what this is. I'm going to look at it, kind of like the model in society would be the forensic team that goes in and tries to find evidence. But they think the evidence is conclusive because they need to. That's what they're paid to do. That's how society runs. We have cause and effect, blame, praise and blame. It's operating all the time. And it is all partial. There's something true about it, but we haven't really strengthened our awareness to go down in deeply and see what is really going on in a really deep way. What you will find is the original misunderstanding is that there's a solid being here called me. So as you go down and investigate in all of the teachings, the five skandhas, the 12 links in the chain of existence, and the realms and every other structure, you eventually find that you're not what you thought you were. That your identity is, I like to say, discontinuous. I mean, there's something there, but it seems to change. If you're going bowling, which I don't know how many people go bowling. If you're going bowling, there's kind of a bowling identity. If you're going to work, then there's that identity. And if you're with your spouse, then there's that identity. And it's not cut and dry. They overlap and everything, but have you noticed that it's discontinuous? And and sometimes that identity feels terrible. Sometimes feels great. It's an amazing thing to look just at that which sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, thinks very, very closely. Did that cover your question? Probably not. So why don't you ask it in a different way so it's easier for me to understand?
So you're talking about forms today, the forms that we use here.
That's what I thought you were asking about.
But sometimes we talk about forms as the parts that make things up that we create a self out of.
Yes, skandhas.
It almost seems like you're talking about two different things when you talk about those things that way. Okay. And I'm trying to understand how those things are directly related to each other.
What and what?
The way that we use forms to describe all the parts that make up a self, and the way that we're using forms in a practice.
the forms that arise in terms of the six sense fields and the perception, concepts, formations, the form of the body, and so on, how that is a natural way of looking at what seems to be occurring, or in other words, living beings, and how that relates to the forms we artificially set up so that we can interface with them. So the forms that are appearing are the ones that seem to support a separate self or consciousness that has some kind of individuality happening. It's fairly strong. The way this shows up is sometimes you'll be having a conversation with someone and they'll say, well, I've always been the kind of person that does, well, the way I was trained was people are looking for some kind of ways to support that identity relative to how, I've always been this, I've always been that. So there's that going on, that kind of form, that kind of support of the discontinuous identity. Then what we do when we set up forms like chanting the sutras, like coming in, like bowing to each other, bowing to the forms in here. There's no worship going on anywhere. What we're doing is we're trying to find out what is actually true. So if you want to find out what is true, you need to clarify that which is appearing. And that which is appearing is, if you go outside this building, is so completely random. I mean, just look at a tree, look at roads, look at a car. Who came up with that? Nobody did. A combination of things over the last hundreds and hundreds of years slowly brought that thing out of people looking at how to put things together, formation. So what we're doing here is we're trying to find out who it is that actually does that, what the identity is, and why there's so much suffering in the world. The world is really, most of the world is, as Dalai Lama said, most of the world is just trying to make a living and feed their kids. But there's a certain few thousand, 100,000 that really want to have control and want to boss everybody else around. And they seem to get in power. So not to go into some kind of political thing, but it's a political thing with us. We need to, when I say we need, I don't know what you need. Go do something else. I'm not here to give you a sales pitch, but when you come in and sit down, you give me permission to talk for an hour or so. And when I have permission to talk, I'm going to let you have it. And when this is done, then we'll just talk about the weather or not. So the form that is happening here is a way of training the mind to relax its grip on forms, to relax its grip on preconceptions, to relax its grip on names, to relax its grip so you can see behind what you name things. Have you noticed how if you walk into a room and you see someone you've never seen before, someone you've never met, you immediately have opinions and ideas about them based on everything, on what they resemble, how their expression on their face, what they're wearing. We can't stand to not know. We can't stand to just be open. If you were in a room and the Dalai Lama was to walk into a room while you were there, Dalai Lama probably wouldn't think anything at all, particularly. He might think, no, there's an ugly person. But I'm saying he's someone as a monk who is trained his whole life to work with preconceptions. So there may be preconceptions there, but it's not so much getting rid of preconceptions. It is when the preconception comes up, you're so clear that you can see that your preconception is not necessarily true. You don't have to get rid of something that is not true. This is the problem with people trying to get rid of their ego. Well, that's just my ego. See, you can see how circular that is. You can spend your whole life saying, well, I'm trying, that's my ego, so I have to be egoless. Well, the actual approach of trying to be egoless is ego. It is ego. It has to happen through realization or awareness. If it happens in any other mode, silver mind control, any kind of pushing, pulling, making you do certain things a certain way and disrespecting the way in which you are confused. There has to be a respect of how you're confused so that if someone is to help you, so they can help you fundamentally right where you're at. And if somebody is, the teaching person is all into authority and doesn't understand the mutuality of this situation that we all find ourselves in, then he or she uh, may jump into some kind of control thing where they think they have to control their students. I'd like to control a few students. Censure.
How do you respect the ways that you're confused?
How do you respect it? Don't meddle with it. If you see confusion in another person, hands off. On the other hand, don't walk away. On the other hand, don't immediately start coming up with excuses for why you can't help them. Do nothing. Do nothing. And when you do nothing, just like when you do nothing in front of the sitting on the cushion looking at the wall, you start to see the very truth of who you are, what you are, and to the degree to which you deceive yourself. If you don't do this, there's no way the teaching person or anybody else can give you your own truth. You have to see it. And it can feel very lonely trying to do that. So you wouldn't meddle. What I would say is, if the person turned around and said, help me, you might say, what can I do? And say, well, I'm sinking. Hang on to me. So you might literally do that. You might literally hold them. You might not be so self-centered as to say, I understand, because you probably don't. When you say to someone who's depressed that you understand, you don't understand what's going on with them. There's no way you can say, well, I understand because I've been depressed, because the word depression is a label for people's intense negativity that is happening, that every story, every idea, every source for that is so complicated and so different. There's no way you can understand what they're dealing with. That's why whenever I talk, discuss or respond to questions about suicide, I say, hands off that situation. To go in there with your presumptions that people shouldn't do that. You don't know. Don't misunderstand. I'm not promoting suicide. If I was doing that, I'd been gone long ago. I'm saying, stay here, have some guts, stay here and see what it is that is difficult. Someone comes to me with that repeatedly. They have to do it a few times, and I talk to them. Then slowly I can see, by meeting them where they're at, I can slowly see if there's any kind of gap where I could possibly help them. But I'm very, very respectful of people's confusion. My teacher was very respectful of mine, so respectful that looking back, I'm just astonished at how incredibly insightful he was. Yes, Lisa.
As a householder, I have a limited amount of time to practice.
Yes.
And so if looking at all of the various forms that are available, what would you suggest is the place to start and focus my attention if I have a limited amount of time to put into it?
How much time do you have?
Well, I create an hour a day for sitting. Beyond
Okay.
that,
You don't have anything else other than that?
I come here and practice the forms that you have set up here.
Yes.
For services, and I do book study once or twice a week.
Yes.
But if I want to start trying to wedge a little more space open, work on forms, should I fill it with more meditation, or are there other forms?
How many, if you don't mind sharing it with all these people that are listening, how many hours would you average a week of meditation, of sitting meditation, the way it's taught here? How many?
A little over an hour a day, depending on whether I'm coming to service
Okay.
or not. So
I would say get it up to 2 hours a day, and then we'll talk again. And I'm not saying that for everyone. I'm saying it for you personally, because I've known you for quite a while. I would say get it up there. And Lisa, one of the ways you can get it up there is you have to work with how you are. Some people might say, okay, I'm going from an hour to 2 hours. That's it. Some people can do that because of their style, their wiring, some people, especially really stubborn people, seem to be able to do that. They like minding themselves. Yeah, this is the way I'm doing it. So some people can do it, but other people, perhaps you, perhaps not. It might be better to say, look at your watch and add a minute every day. So you're up to 63, 64, 67. And then if you feel like it, add maybe 10 minutes and do it gradually. So the shock of doing that isn't quite so, because sometimes the shock is enough that you just stop doing it. And the mind will begin to say, well, this isn't really working well for me. Sokuzan doesn't really understand what I'm going through, and I know he's really busy, so I don't want to have an interview with him. I get that every now and then. But I know you're busy. I said, well, let me be the one to turn you down. So it's good of you to ask that. So it's a good thing to respond to. And everyone is so different. But an hour a day is pretty good sitting. An hour plus is good. 6.5, 7 hours is even better. You can do that right here. You can come and sit all day. Just pick out a day and say, or come to the all day at the end of the month. The end of the last Saturday of every month is scheduled sitting from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. It's not entirely 12 hours. We also go to lunch and come back, and we have the work period, and or we help people get people up on the roof to paint the roof. It's not quite done yet. That's not funny. So, but the idea would be to look at the forms for you personally, and how could I extend my awareness practice, and also reading traditional texts. Some of those I like to go back to the original. When I say original, the ones that have been around for years, like the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Sambhina Mochana Sutra, and there's many others. The platform scripture is the one we were studying yesterday, the sixth patriarch, Wei Chinese patriarch. So, and those are all supportive to our thinking process in different ways. And it's like I was saying, the first reminder, first contemplate the preciousness of being free and well favored. Difficult to gain, easy to lose. No, I must do something meaningful. It's a very direct thing that touches you. If you read that, listen to that, memorize that. First, contemplate the preciousness, the value of don't throw your life away. Don't miss your life. Live your life and live it as clearly as you can, rather than buying into some particular thing, including Buddhism. Don't even buy into Buddhism. If you're really practicing Buddhism, there is no Buddhism. There's only reality and truth. You have to have a form. You can't buy a pair of shoes unless it comes in a shoebox. Right? Does that work? You have to have a box to put things in. So that's Buddhism. Sometimes what does he say? Out of the box. No more walls. But you have to start out with the walls. You have to start out by looking at the walls so that you can see that you've always been free. Freedom is not from or to. Freedom from something or freedom to do something. Freedom is fundamental. If you have it, the search is over. There's no more search. You aren't looking for anything. Yes, Michael.
So you do the forms to see or to be open to them. Is that freedom then? Or is that
Not yet.
approach to it?
It's an approach to seeing what a prisoner you are. And to be free, you have to see how imprisoned you are. If you don't, people who have opinions don't realize they're being imprisoned by their opinions. Anytime you talk to someone who says, well, I think this, I think that, well, I've always thought this, and I've always thought that, and this is what I believe. What do you believe about what I believe about what you believe? What do you think about what I'm thinking? I think you're crazy. I would not say that. I would say it under my breath. I would say it like a ventriloquist. You know what a ventriloquist is? Somebody who shows their voice. I think you're nuts.
Who said that?
Who said that? And you know, you wouldn't be making fun of this whole situation, but people are suffering. People are having difficulty. And so if people come and give you permission to help them, then you can. But you have to make sure that they mean it. Because sometimes people say, help me, but they have a specific way they want help. You know, give me money or something like that. But it takes a while to see if somebody really, really wants you to help them. And if somebody comes to me and wants help, it takes a while to see who they are. I have to talk to them for a while. I'm not going to jump in. Of course, the first thing I'll say is sit down, meditate. Sit down, face the wall, do it a lot. You can come in here every day. It costs nothing. We can stay overnight. We have to charge money for, but it costs nothing. There's no fee charged to come in here and meditate 6.5 hours every day and have somebody there ringing a bell for that to happen. Start and finish. Yes.
What is the reason for the start and finish bell?
So that you can have some way of marking the container. We have to put the container for this practice is the Zendo or the building. So we have that container. If we just opened up all the walls and sat out in the field somewhere, we could do it for a while. But as soon as things started feeling good, we would think that was the goal. We've all talked to somebody, well, I like to meditate out under the trees. I like to be with nature and commune. And this is just, there's nothing wrong with this, it's fine, but it's very, very romantic. And there's nothing wrong with romance. It's just that it won't solve the fundamental struggling that's going on. It won't help you when you're facing your death or the death of someone you care about or love. The only thing that will solve that is a deep, deep understanding of what life and death is about. Yes, sir.
So the Zendo is just another form.
Another form. So we need the form, and then we have the form of we ring the bell if we're at home or here to set up so this is a form in space, that's a form in apparent time. So we ring the bell, we know that when the bell rings, that's why I say sometimes don't use a smartphone, because the way smartphones are headed, eventually the smartphone, the next app that's going to come out is one that'll read your blood pressure, your temperature, your breathing rate, and will tell you whether you're attaining enlightenment or not. You're about there, you're at the third boomy, now you're, and they'll do it by whether alpha waves or theta or beta waves are happening. And it'll just do it, and it'll tell you if your posture changes slightly. It's like biofeedback. And it's not wrong. It's just what really soft, non-judgmental, what word can I use? Stupid, that's good. Stupid. And when I say that, I don't mean that you couldn't have your smartphone sitting there and look at the timing on it, but I think it's better to ring a bell with your own hands, to not let the whole technology take over your life. I'm fine, you can play video games, do whatever you want. Use the technology that's there, but don't let it use you. It's coming, and it might be a century away, but it's coming where this will be a really strange world. If it's still here, if we don't blow it up first or shut it down by global or weather problems.
Lorraine, it's going to be stuck in the back of your head.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. They're going to want to plug you in, but they'll sell it to you. This is wonderful. Do you know that you'll never have well, you know what's happening with your heart. It'll send the ambulance to you before you even have your heart attack. I don't know if I care for that too much. It's getting a little bit too invasive into each person. I don't think that it's wrong. I just think that it's too much spaghetti. It's just too much, and it's just so much there that we stop being able to see. We're being told what we're supposed to know, and so it's more like a big control system going on. Any questions about that, or anything for that matter? Shoka.
What is the importance of the form of a private interview?
When you sit down and have a private interview, at least with me, and I've had lots of those with others, both as me sitting in front of a teacher or students sitting in front of me. So I've been doing that for 40 years, a lot of it. I can't even count how many times that's happened, both directions. I was trained as a meditation teacher in 1978 and was taught how to do that by my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And at that time, the instruction was teach the meditation and don't become their counselor. Teach the meditation, and if they keep asking questions that have that kind of a dynamic to them, point it upstream, up to the teaching person, up to Rinpoche or someone higher level. So you would teach the meditation, and you would relate to simple issues with meditation, but you wouldn't go any further than that. And then so the form is you come in, you sit, you bow to each other, or this way, however the bow is. You set up a structure whereby there's just the only thing that needs to happen there is some kind of communication between the teaching person and the learning person, the teacher and the student. And that takes on different forms. And the form that is happening here that you experience when you sit in front of me and ask questions about your practice is it sets up kind of an artificial situation where you can be very direct. You don't have anybody else listening. You're by yourself, and you can talk about personal issues, whatever. So, but the form is to help so that you show the teacher how you're functioning, how you're working with this this practice, this awareness practice. So.
Is that a form that's necessary if we want to go deeper into our practice?
Going deeper into your practice is something that you do. It's when you come out and you check in with the person who is your teacher. Then he or she, you check in, and then and at some point you're going to start to feel like you're realizing something. And you need to bring that to the teacher and tell them about it so they can say, nope. Or not. Maybe they'll say, yeah, that's it. Like maybe it'll be like Wei Ning. You'll write a poem on the wall and everybody will look at it and think that guy's enlightened. That's probably not going to happen here. In fact, I call that graffiti. Unless it's tagging, you can tag all you want because those are all invisible to me. I just lied. Thank you.
What is mutuality?
So mutuality, in the way I use that word, is that the teacher and the student are not separate from the teacher's point of view. I don't see people, when I meet people, I don't see people that, oh, the poor wretch, I have to teach them. I actually, on their level, I talk to them on their level with some sincerity. And if they're open and they're sincere, then something can occur. Then the person who has just spent 40 years doing this can fundamentally help the person who has done it for 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. Someone who's still working on how does this work? How does the path open? What is the Buddhist path? What is the path of sanity? What is the path of awakening? How can I live a completely sane and non-crazy life? How do I work with my craziness? How do I work with my negativity? How do I work with that? And what I'm saying is I have to first see that show up to know you're ready for it. So all students are different. Some people come in and it's like a confessional. Some people come in and won't tell you anything, just want to complain about everything. Those are usually the longest interviews because I'm a very good listener. I will listen to you complain indefinitely. And then I might say about every 25, 30 minutes, you have a question? I say, well, no, I really didn't have a question. I just wanted to share with you. What would you do if your son did that? You know, it's just like that kind of thing. I'd say, probably not much. I should let you know that Senshu is a counselor, so she's talking to people face to face all the time. Further question?
What is mutuality outside of the student-teacher relationship?
The mutuality there is a realization that you're not separate from anything. And you actually do that when you talk to the teacher. I'm doing it now. When I say doing it, I'm not doing anything. I just see that nothing is separate from anything else. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to fix. There's not a person in here that is not completely the Buddha, completely awakened. It's just that any you in here, you're covering it up with your hope and fear. You're covering it up with your confusion, with your belief that you can't do it, with your belief that you're wrong, with your belief that you've been had things done to you that make it impossible. I'm not saying you haven't had things done to you. We can swap stories anytime. I wasn't exactly treated very well myself, but you don't have to go there. You don't have to reify anything that's ever happened to you. You don't have to go back and fuel that and make it burn because that's ego. You have to transcend this world without leaving it. So it's mutual in that you're with the person and you actually, sometimes I say you can see yourself. Everywhere you look, you can see yourself. You're not separate from anything. It's a profound and unshakable realization, not an experience. Like I said, experiences come and they go. Realization, if that occurs, it's not even an occurrence. It's like you wake up in the morning, you realize you've been in bed all night. You're awake. It's not something that you necessarily go back to sleep. It's a realization. You see it, not separate. If you want that, I can help you. If you don't want that, go play golf. Go join the Elks Club, or become an astrophysicist, or become a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or do something. Do anything. And what am I saying when I say I can help you with it? I'm saying if you practice, you sit down and look at your mind, watch what's happening, watch the way you deceive yourself, watch the way you keep buying into bullshit things that arise in your consciousness. Look at that so they'll slowly start to break apart. It takes a lot of guts to do that because it doesn't feel good to sit down and look at your mind. It's not comfortable. It's not the kind of meditation that feels soothing necessarily. It may have the soothing thing about it. If you do enough of it, you see, well, this is actually quite a relief from running around and dealing with the rest of the world. This is why so many people, once they get onto this, want to go into retreat forever. Not everybody, but some people I just want to stay in the monastery. I just want to go up on top of a mountain and never come down, because they realize that there is a sense of tranquility with not operating. It takes a while. But one has to keep going even deeper to see that you're not separate from even the confusion in the world. And this allows you to come back into the world and function in the world. So it's mutual. Mutual. You're not separate from the worst person in the world, or you're not, relatively speaking, you're not separate from the people who are suffering terribly and trying to make other people suffer out of revenge or whatever. Not separate from those people. Mutual. See?
Are we all just aspects of a single consciousness?
I think that's a way that you could say it. It's a way that has been said, but the problem with making a label like that, it's a very strong positive label. The problem with doing that is if you say it, as soon as you say it, you start to lean on it as a reference point. And what we're trying to do here, what this old man's trying to do, is getting you to not rely on any reference points, so that your awareness can sink below what I call the radar of ego. Ego is looking for reference points, and that's kind of a really, and it's true. I mean, there's a relative aspect to it that is true. Just aspects of the same consciousness. But I like to say it this way, and this is harder for ego to get self-centeredness to use as a crutch, not separate. Any one single thing, anywhere, a white mouse, a white thing, coffee cup, person, walls, windows, people. Everything is getting its apparent identity, separation, the me feeling, from everything else. And the way to track that down is to first go to the initial feeling of being a self and seeing that it actually has 5 aspects: form, feeling, perception, concept or naming, or like what you were operating there, that's called fourth skandha. The fourth skandha is actually churning up some kind of a structure to make everything else seem like some kind of unity. If something is unified, you don't have to unify it. If something is awake, you don't have to wake it up. You just have to uncover it. You have to pull up the blankets back, so to speak. It's awake, wake up. So your comment is correct, but that approach is just a little bit too strong. You follow me?
I do.
Good.
It's a dangerous concept.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, depending on how someone uses it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far either.
No?
I'm going to disagree with everything you say.
Usually
It's my job. Sure.
So does the ego have any value?
Yeah, everything has its relative value. So You can't awaken to no separation or ultimate truth without the separate paranoid insurance policy called ego. You have to have the contrast to awaken, to see that the contrast are not separate. It's like the way it's done philosophically, the yang and yin symbol are, black and white are not separate, but they make up, they're very different, but they make up the whole. You can't have awakening without delusion. You have to have that. We have a few minutes. Yes, Michael.
So are they both empty?
Yeah. Everything's empty. But that emptiness is so complete that it is complete fullness at the same time. This is something you have to realize this. If you don't realize it, then you'll still go around with kind of a little fog around your head all the time. Like, what was that? Peanuts character that always had a fog around its head.
It was dust.
Pigpen.
Pigpen.
Pigpen, yeah. Dust, fog, dust, fog.
So you said a few minutes ago that there's nothing to fix, but then how do we get better if there's nothing to fix?
Well, I think the whole idea of getting better is so relative, and we're kind of misled by identifying with our body situation, which something needs to heal, needs to get better. We're always using those images. It's not that there isn't something to that, but to focus too much on that focuses more on some kind of something being wrong, and we need to get in there and make it better. So what that is about is trying to make a better ego, trying to make a better, it's called self-esteem, or you don't have a very healthy ego, do you? Well, no, I have a very unhealthy ego. In fact, it's flat out dead. Of course, it's not dead because you can't kill something that's not real. But if you see that it's not real, the struggle is over with. It's actually is a spiritual. The fancy word is soteriological. In other words, it's not just a mundane thing of trying to get better. Because if we live forever, then that may work. But life is like you jump off a cliff and you don't know how far it is to the bottom. But you will die. The thing with awakening is you jump off a cliff and there is no bottom. Or you'll never hit. If you hit, then it was not a spiritual path, it was a mundane path.
I'm thinking in terms of relating to the form then, as we sit, there seems to be a desire to progress.
There is.
Is there a progression on this path then?
I think there is, and quite often the 10 bhumis, the 11 bhumis, there's that. There's different progressional things. There's the 5 paths, path of accumulation, the path of consolidation, the path of meditation, and so on like that. So there's different kinds of paths or different kinds of structures or steps, but they're just ways of talking about it. And sometimes I say, ask a similar question. I say, if you know somebody's been practicing for 20 years, wouldn't you think that they could tell you which bhumi they're on? Nobody's ever going to tell you that, oh, I'm on the 3rd bhumi, or I'm on the 5th bhumi, or I'm on the 6th. Somebody else might look at you and say that you are, but that would be just their idea about it. So go ahead.
I think I'm looking at a more practical
Okay.
side. So if,
And ask it that way.
well, I sit and I'm depressed,
Okay.
and I think I have an expectation.
Naturally there is being covered up by the struggle. Stop struggling. Be depressed. How do you do that? Sit down and look without anything else. No jabber about it. No interaction with a philosopher. No interaction with a psychiatrist. Nothing at all. Sit down and look at it. And then you will see whether you need to go get medication for it. You'll see, there's something chemically wrong here. You will see it. But you should be the one who sees it, not someone else necessarily saying what they should or what you should or shouldn't do based on their evaluation. All that being said, I'm not saying there isn't someone out there who, and there isn't a situation where you could feel really terrible and go to a psychiatrist or a doctor or a therapist and get medication that would help you. So I'm not saying I don't understand the causes and conditions. So therefore I can't say you shouldn't take Prozac, shouldn't take Wellbutrin, shouldn't take, all the other things that are meant to mood elevators or mood enhancers, whatever they may be. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you should decide that. You should look at your own body, mind, and say, yeah, I need to do this. And this applies to just about everything. But of course, some of these things, alcohol, heroin, I just need to do LSD. I just need I need that. I'm not going that far as to get so fancy as to say that I'm necessarily endorsing everything you do. I'm just saying you could at least look at it before you jump into getting somebody else's help. When I say made, haven't made anything, but I've set people back when they try to come this way deliberately so they can see if they really want to do this. This is a hard path. I want everybody to do it, but that's not going to happen. There's people in this room right now I may never see again, or I may see once a year. And that's their understanding of what they need to do. I'm not going to try to convince them of anything. So someone who's depressed, quite often what happens there as they go into, we've seen this before, they can't handle it, they can't handle it, and then they keep pushing it down, trying to justify it, trying to act like it's not there, and push it down, and then it starts seeping through, it comes back out, and it sometimes can come in such a way that they think, well, the only way to get rid of this is to, and this is a person that's too proud to ask for help. Quite often, that's what suicide is. I'm not here to diagnose anything, but having been suicidal myself, I have a little bit of experience with it. But it's too much pride to maybe ask someone or talk to someone about it or bring it out. That's why quite often that happens, and suddenly some people we think, I didn't even know that was happening. I didn't know that they were having that issue. Other people we know, and they still do it anyway. It's very difficult. It's very scary if it's somebody you love or really close to, and there's that kind of threat coming up. It really is a strong feeling of helplessness, especially when you can see that they're not going to ask you. They're just not going to ask you. There's too much pride, usually. That would be my guess. More.
Earlier in your meditation instruction, you talked about the tone and tenor.
Yeah.
How are they important in relating to someone?
If you're not busy projecting onto someone or judging someone or evaluating someone, or you're not concerned about what they're thinking about what you're thinking, and you're not concerned with it, and then you don't have much to do. So you can just someone's sitting in front of you and they come in for an interview, which means they probably want some help from you on some level, which sometimes just manifests as them telling you a bunch of stuff, which is fine. You can do that too. Sometimes you might have to do that 15, 20 times before you actually get down to what you really need to talk about. So tone and tenor just tells you kind of where the person's at. You're listening to them. It's kind of like the image sometimes is used as a doctor or someone who's kind of taking your temperature in an odd kind of way. That you can feel if you're not doing much, so you get around somebody, you can kind of feel what's happening with them. But you may not have permission to say anything to them about it. So tone and tenor is just a way of saying the nuances of how someone appears. I've over the years have had people come that I feel like I have a really strong connection to them, but if they don't see it, I don't do anything about it. And it's difficult for me because it helps me to realize I have no say so about what people do. I have no say so about it, other than I'm here. Not that I'm some kind of magical person or savior. I'm not. In fact, I'm ordinary. So ordinary that I'm not all that interesting. People come in and say, this guy he didn't act holy to me. He doesn't act like some kind of superior person. He's kind of a stupid sense of humor.
What are the aspects that make up such a strong connection between the student and the teacher?
So they're practically invisible. That's why you have to wait. You have to wait and see if they're there. And even when they sometimes get there, sometimes you realize that the person is, not speaking of you necessarily, but sometimes the person is not really ready to let go of that. It's just too painful to let go of your ideas and your self-centeredness and what you think is right and wrong. It's very difficult to do that. So everyone's path is unique and different. Everyone's spiritual path, if they're on that spiritual path, which means wanting to see what is true rather than try to get better. So let's see what is really true. Let's go really down to the basis of the consciousness, of the awareness, and see what's really happening there. Any questions? No questions. So here again, I've made myself completely clear. No questions at all. Yes, Michael.
Would you say that there is nothing to learn?
I would say ultimately it's not so much a learning, but yet it is. I mean, that would be going a little bit too far. It's too absolute, nothing to learn. But it's also very relative. Nothing to learn. That means you eliminate learning. So, but there is a path in the 5 paths of the tradition that's sometimes taught. Is the 5 paths are. See, I don't know if I can remember. I don't teach these, so I don't know if I can remember. Path of accumulation, path of consolidation, path of meditation. Next, meditation. The path of what's the next one? Path of meditation. The path. I know the last one is the path of no more learning. So that one speaks about a learning situation that's happening, but then it's like I said before, you're not going to find somebody that says, "Well, I'm on this path, or I'm on this path, I'm on that path," or even a teacher that may point that out to you, although that's possible. But the path of no more learning is just a way of saying that you're all through searching. There's nothing else to find. You found. It might sound fancy, but you found reality. And it's not all that great. That wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. In other words, there's no other place to go. So there's no more learning in the sense that there may be things to learn about, but the fundamental nature of the beginning of your path is there's no other beyond that you need to get to. Everything is not separate. Sir, one more question.
If we're endeavoring to follow forms and we find ourselves straying from the form, how do we relate to that?
See that you're straying is one, and just don't make adjustments too quickly. See what it is, return to the form. One of the things I say over and over that I learned from my teacher was return to your original inspiration. You could say that's one way to check out how a marriage is going. If you're having trouble, so go back to your original inspiration. See what was the spark that got you together in the first place. All the time I was going through the last number of years that I went through difficulties, I would return to my original inspiration, to my connection with my teacher. Everyone's a little different, but my connection was with the teacher. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called a guru, which just means Sanskrit for teacher. So it's not anything fancy. So see the way in which you're going outside this. See what the form is, and then see which way you go outside of it. Just like there's a form here. If there are 4 practice residents that live here, which you're one of them, and you have a job, you also have a job. And when you're not at the job, and if you live in this facility, you pay tuition, you don't pay rent, you pay tuition, and then it's different for everyone depending on your situation. But you're required to be here and do the forms, 7 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon, 7 at night, unless you come and say, I have this to do, I have that to do, or I'm working, so those are just forms, and you'll notice that it'd be hard to do this on your own. So that's why we set this up, so that you can come in and train your mind in a structure, a form that is already set up. But also, if you don't comply, nobody's going to run to your room or something and bang on the door. Where the hell are you? Why aren't you down here sitting? It'll just be noticed that you're not there. But people, it's just not a school for 8-year-olds. It's different than other monasteries, much more parental and tight. This one is we respect people. People need to have their own way of relating to the form. They need to be allowed to have a really strong form, 6.5 hours a day, plus the 8 hours of scheduled book study, the sutras and so on. But then to see how they relate to that. See, sometimes the person isn't there. Sometimes the person is ill, like you were. I'm not coming over to see if you're really sick.
You did it once.
Huh?
So you did it once.
What did I say?
Oh, no. It was when I was working a lot.
Oh, what did
You said I need to work less.
You said you need to work. I said you need to work less.
Yes.
What did you do?
Work
Got that down. And it's different for everyone. Everyone's chemistry, everyone's way, reason for being here and style, way of connecting with this teaching is so different. And that's quite often in a broader teaching sense, or a teacher with thousands of students isn't going to be able to do that. That's why my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, had trained a lot of people really early on to be kind of meditation instructors, so they could relate to the meditation instructor, so he wouldn't have this big load of talking to lots of people. Okay, we can close. We'll dedicate the merit, so Senchu will go back to the Doan seat and lead us just a short dedication. Please stand.
We do have a donation box at the back. It says DANA, which is Dana. That means generosity. So if you can help us, we would appreciate that. May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Shi 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 Son Mu Sa Mo Ko Sa Mo Ko Ho Cha Mo Ro Mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Vaishnava, Paramita.
Thank you all for coming.